The single scariest line in all of chapter 1172 was the final line of the chapter where Zoro announced to his giant comrades, "I have a plan." Whenever those words come out of Zoro or Luffy's mouths, it's almost never a good sign. These are the last two members of the crew you ever want to be put in charge of coming up with a strategy, because things are pretty much guaranteed to get much, much, much worse. And that is exactly what I expected coming into this chapter. For Zoro's plan to somehow backfire drastically and put the three of them at an even bigger disadvantage than they already were. But to Zoro's credit, this time when he said that he had a plan, he actually meant it, and to an even bigger surprise, his plan actually worked. Said plan being to avoid the risk of being Dami reverse-eyed by using the heads of the demonized giants as stepping stones to avoid being caught in between any two of them at once, jumping from one head to another until he reached the center of the lot, then jumping high in the sky and slashing all of them down with crossing the six paths, which I don't remember its Japanese name. And these giants should be down for the count because we do see little black sparks around both Zoro and them as he throws out the attack, meaning that this was likely infused with Conqueror's Haki, which should have cut off their healing, at least temporarily. I say should because Oda hasn't always been consistent when it comes to whether or not the Black Lightning means a character is actually using their cock in battle. Sometimes it just ends up being armament. But I think it's a safe bet to say that Zoro was using it based on what he learned from Gaban, that demons equal connection to Imu, and a connection to Imu equals a Wolverine level healing factor that can only be countered by one's cock. So this is without a doubt a shot of our swordsman using his at full mass, which is a good thing. We need to see Zoro practice more with his power because I think people tend to forget since it's been years for us in real time since he's unlocked it, but Zoro has only had access to Conqueror's Haki in real time for about a month, maybe two at most. And until literally like an hour ago, he didn't even know that he was a Conqueror. He just thought it was a boosted form of Iron Haki that he got from taming Enma. So really, Zoro is still a novice at the power, not much more ahead of Sanji, who will only just now be awakening it this arc. He's far from being the expert at it that Luffy is, and even Luffy still has a lot to learn. So this stage right here, where every opponent he could possibly face will push him to rely on his cock more, is a great training ground. Which is kind of fitting, because for a majority of the first half of this arc, a lot of fans assumed that this would be a training arc for the crew. And while it's still up in the air if the others will gain any new abilities or skills from Elbaf, at least the monster trio will definitely benefit from being here. But getting back to the fight, if you can even call it that, Zoro does ask Haruden and Stanzen if he's allowed to cut down the giants before jumping in, which the two giants are a bit hesitant to say yes to. Because demonized or not, these are the original giant warrior pirates, their idols, the people they modeled their entire crew after. They hold a lot of respect for them. And even in this dire situation where they're trying to unalive other giants, it's still hard to see them hurt. That is until two of the demons notice them and begin to mock their dream of uniting all the giants around the world. Then Haruden and Stanzen were like, "Zoro, go at it." Honestly, the funniest part of the entire chapter to me. But with the demon crew down, that just leaves the captains, Dory and Bragi, who notice Zoro immediately and go to swing at him, but Zoro manages to use his swords to push himself out of the way, leading to the two missing their heads and slashing through each other in a shot that mirrors their fight from Little Garden. What's weird though is that everyone reacts to it and it's presented as if the two just died, but we know that it should be able to heal these wounds pretty easily. So I'm not sure if Oda is just playing up the drama of the scene or if I'm missing something here, but for what I understand, these two should be back up in the next chapter. Either way, it looks like for the time being, Zoro is going to be here fighting the demonized giants, but I still believe that this is only a quick pit stop for him, and that before long, he'll be off fighting one of the God's Knights. Moving on though, we actually get a really important and long-awaited meeting midway through this chapter, when Brook actually managed to drag himself all the way over to where Imu is, in order to confirm Gunko's true identity. He refers to her as Princess Shori, someone who as far as he's aware should be well into their 80s by now, but without a doubt looks exactly how he remembered her. And this is when we get the tearful reunion between the two that we've been waiting on since the first time we got a hint at there being some kind of connection between them, with Brook being seemingly a father figure to Gunko, or I guess we should call her Shori now. But that's not what happened, because Oda threw us the biggest curveball when Brook said that he had hoped he'd never have to see her again in his life. Turns out that apparently Gunko had killed her own father, a man that Brook greatly respected, back in whatever kingdom they came from, likely right in front of Brook, and he's never forgiven her for it. And I am now even more interested in discovering what happened between them than I already was. Especially since we know that Brook was the only member of the crew aware of the God's Knights, likely from encountering them prior to becoming a pirate, when he was some sort of military official in his home country. And Imu going to great lengths to suppress Gunko's memories of Brook and their shared past. That tells me that at some point the world government either tried to take control of or just outright destroy their kingdom, and at some point during this, Imu used Gunko to kill her dad. It's not likely that Imu took direct control of Gunko like they are now, because she was still only a Blade of God during God Valley, which means she didn't have a deep enough covenant mark during that event for Imu to be able to control her body directly. And God Valley was only 38 years prior to the present day, while whatever happened between Gunko and Brook had to have happened prior to that, since he died over 50 years ago, after the fall of his kingdom and becoming a pirate. So it's not going to be as simple as Imu controlling Shuri and forcing her to kill her own dad. She had to do it herself. But it is very likely that by the time that happened, Imu had already corrupted Shuri's mind, overriding her memories as princess of her kingdom, and turned her into Gunko, Imu's loyal servant. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Brook tackles that reveal once he discovers that Shuri wasn't completely in control of herself back then, and if he'll shift his over 50-year grudge against her onto Imu themselves. That's of course assuming that he gets to find out, which could very well happen by the end of this arc, because Gunko is already starting to fight back against Imu the more her memories come back to her, regaining control of her body long enough to free Brook and the rest of the Straw Hats from her arrows. So, assuming Luffy's able to blast his cock on a similar level that Joy Boy's Knot did back on Egghead, he should be able to force Imu out of her body and let her tell Brook the truth about what happened. Or at least in a perfect scenario, that's what would happen. We'll have to wait and see if that's the route Oda decides to go in, because it's just as likely that we wait on its reveal for a couple more arcs. Oh, and quick side note, I really dig the look of Brook using a sword and shield to fight. I know he has a more fencing style, but I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of him keeping the shield going forward. Anyway, taking a quick detour to the rest of the crew, most of them are free now except for Robin, who is more concerned with the kids than she is herself, but they're too far away for even a giant to get to them before they get on the ship. And that's when Sanji comes flying in, the only person who is possibly fast enough to get from where they are over to where the kids are. Though funny enough, we don't actually see him on panel in this chapter. So yeah, like I figured, Sanji is just making a quick pit stop to check in on Nami and Robin before going off to fight Summers after Nami sends him to save the kids. Speaking of, we do check in with them, and even though Gunko interfered with her arrow, the one leading them to the boat is still active, and at this point, they're almost there, with Summers going alongside them to keep them in place and make sure that nothing stops them from getting to the boat. And this is where he ends up making the biggest mistake of the entire chapter, announcing to Imu that he completed his mission before actually getting it done. Because right here, before they actually reach the ship, all the giant bombs come running in, led by Ripley. Got a little bit of whiplash at this part though, because one of the giants we see running alongside Ripley looks exactly like Jenny, like to a T, has her exact same face and everything. I had to take a second on that one. Also, don't know if this was mentioned earlier in this arc or not, but I learned for the first time here that Oimo is a grandpa to one of the kids, which admittedly is kind of cool. It was actually kind of fun seeing him come running alongside the moms. And look, at first Summers isn't worried, they're not going to get in his way because they have to get past the Nightmare Nika first, which despite their attacks, it just gets angry and fights back. And even if they did manage to take it down, it will take way too long for them to do it. By then, he'll be on the ship with the kids sailing off into the sunset. So yeah, as far as Summers is concerned, this mission is already over. But what he didn't count on was the new giant warrior pirates coming in from the distance. They're still pretty far away, but close enough for the three of them to launch a very powerful sovereignty attack at the Nightmare. This marks, I believe, the fourth sovereignty attack we've had in the series, this one being called Go Koku, which I believe translates to something like Bountiful Harvest. Could be completely wrong though, do not take my translation as a fact, I am not an expert on Japanese. But either way, the attack was powerful enough to knock the Nightmare back, pushing it onto Summers, who then deflects it from falling on him to falling on top and crushing the ship. So yeah, like I said, biggest mistake he made, announcing to Imu that he finished the mission before actually finishing the mission. But I mean, at this point, I imagine Imu is used to Summers being a complete failure, so probably won't be too surprised by this. But now, their win condition has been completely erased because they no longer have a way to get the kids off the island. So now, the only option Imu has left is to corrupt as many giants as they can and simply just kill the rest. Because after that speech from Jarl in the last chapter, the giants will not give up fighting. It's either they drive these demons from their home or die trying. And with whatever chaos that is unfolding back in the Holy Land, Imu doesn't have much time left to stay here and come up with a new plan. So this is their last chance of conquering the giants. Because if this fails, then the army they needed for the final war will become some of their greatest enemies. But let me know your thoughts on the chapter in the comments down below. I have been Zay, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.